show is called The Family Legend. Many years ago, when I taught English at Gilroy High School, and my students read Victor Villaseñor's novel Reign of Gold, which is the true story of both his mother's and his father's sides of the family when they came from Mexico to California. And it includes the story of how his parents met and found each other and fell in love. What I would do with that is a project where I had my students look into their families and come up with stories from their past, and in some cases creating legends for their children. And that project, The Family Legend, became something that I really treasured as a teacher because it celebrates culture, it celebrates language, it celebrates every person's contribution to this giant spectrum of humanity. And so these performances will run seamlessly after I introduce the first family legend. I'll introduce them, have the first student come up. Each of the students will introduce themselves, and then as they come up and the next one comes up, they will also be introducing. And so, without further ado, here are the first of the family legends.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pedro, and today I'm going to tell you a story about life in El Salvador. Life was good. I had a large family that loved me. I don't mean to brag, but I had a pretty big mansion, with a ranch and employees working for me. And, well, life was good. I had anything anyone could ask for. But, as there are the good, there are the bad. And the bad side to that was that there were the guerrillas, not the monkeys, but the fighters. They rebelled against the country, and they fought against each other. And many of them would invade my property. And when I saw someone invading my property, I didn't take kindly to that. Get my shotgun. No, I wouldn't shoot them. Just near their feet, just to scare them off. But anyway, they would invade my property, but they would always come and knock on my door and ask for food. And I think every person is equal. So no matter the kind of person that it was, I give them food and give them a place to sleep for the night. And I made many enemies that way, but I didn't care. And one day, when I was patrolling on my horse, we'll call her Bessie, we were riding along, checking on the employees, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I saw 3 figures. And I knew it wasn't my employees, because I told them to never go near the cave where I saw those shadows, because that is where we kept our supply of water, which is vital for survival. So I got on Bessie, cocked my gun, we rode back over there, slowly got off my horse, and prepared to go around the corner of the cave, silently, tense. As I neared the corner, I could hear them. They were laughing at me. They were mocking me, saying I'd never find out that it was them that stole my water. So I tensed up, prepared to go around the corner, and all of a sudden, I heard a yell. Then 2 more. I dashed inside the cave. But I couldn't see anything. And I looked down, and there on the floor was a bucket of water spilling into the earth. And quickly, I dashed back outside of the cave, and I called to my employees, "Hey, come check this out!" And we dashed back inside. But all that was left was the bucket. So, confused, I slowly trekked back home. And as I sat on that porch that night, my daughter on my lap, thought about the day's events, and I was just glad that I had a family who loved me and cared for me no matter what, during the hard times and during all the struggles that went on in my life. But to this day, I never quite realized that cave is very peculiar, because the incident that happened that day, that wasn't the first time. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sylvia Mazariegos. I have a daughter here. Her name is Victoria Mazariegos. She asked me to tell a story today, and I chose a story that happened when I was 6 years old and I was still living in Ecuador. When we lived there, I had this huge hill in the back of my house, and my sister and brothers and I used to love to slide down that hill with cardboard boxes that we found around the streets. But at the end of this huge hill was this huge body of water. It was like really muddy. It wasn't even really water anymore. It was like more like slime. And I was always terrified of the slime because I couldn't swim. And so this one time I was sliding down and I couldn't stop myself because I was going too fast. And so I was getting really scared and I was grabbing at the grass at each side, and the blades of grass were cutting my hands, and the blood from my hands were making it so hard to grab on. And I closed my eyes and I screamed because I thought I was going to fall into the water. But then I opened my eyes and I had stopped. And that was the scariest moment of my life to this day. It was just really scary. And a few days after that happened, I started getting sick. I started not really wanting to eat. I had to lay down a lot because I was losing energy. And my parents didn't really know what was wrong with me. So they would take me to doctors, and all the doctors would do was prick me with needles and everything. But they would send me home telling me that I was fine. But I wasn't eating. I was sick, and they said I was healthy. So my parents didn't know what to do, so they took me home. And on this one day, they took me to my abuelita's house. And my abuelita told me never to tell this to anyone, not to my parents. But my abuelita picked me up, took me to this woman's house, and I didn't know who this woman was. But once we were inside, this woman made me undress and stand on a table in the center of the room. And she left and came back with a guinea pig in her hand. And she put the guinea pig to me, and as soon as the guinea pig touched my skin, it died. And it went limp, and she prayed. And then she ripped the guinea pig open and took the heart out. And she held it to me, and when she opened her fist, the heart turned to ashes. It just crumbled in her hand. And so she let that fall. And she looked at my abuelita and she said she'd been spooked by something like a spirit or something. She's been spooked. And so my abuelita took me home, and that was that. And once I was home, I started rotting away again. I started withering away. I got really skinny. I couldn't really talk. I couldn't get up because I had no energy. And then my mind started losing itself because I would start hallucinating. I hallucinated a boy playing with a ball at the corner of my room. And this one time I hallucinated a huge bull with sharp horns running at me. And I screamed. It was terrifying, and to this day I'm terrified of bulls. I am scared of cows and bulls, and that stuck with me. And this one time, I don't know if it's real or not, but I saw flies circling around me, and flies fly around you when you're about to die or around dead things, so that scared me. My family, they lost hope. They thought I was going to die for sure, so they were going to take me to a hospital to die there, and not so I wouldn't die at home. But before they were going to do that, my parents really wanted to just try one last thing, one more hope, And so they took me to this man's house, and he was considered a witch doctor. And this man stood me in the center of this dim, candlelit room, and he made me undress, and he prayed for me, and he rubbed herbs all over my body, and he was chanting, and he broke eggs, and he rubbed eggs all over me, and then he breathed fire on me, and I knew I was supposed to be scared, but I just didn't have the energy to feel anything. And so he left the room, and he came back with this jar of white liquid, and he gave it to my parents, and he said, give her 1 cup in the morning and 1 cup at night, and she will get hungry and she will get better. My parents didn't believe them, they didn't believe him. So when they took me home, they just did as he said. They didn't think anything of it. They gave me a cup, and it tasted like water. And I drank it, and the next morning I was hungry, and I got better, and I'm here now.
So hey, I'm Roger Stormont. So what's going on here? Oh, you want me to tell you about my life? Well, okay, I guess. Most of my life, I have not had much money. I never lived in a big house. I never drove a nice car, and I never went to a nice restaurant for my birthday. But this is mostly because I have a lot of bad luck and get into a lot of trouble. Oh, you want to hear about it? Okay, I guess. This isn't on record, right? Well, I guess. So, well, what to tell you? There was that one thing with with my girlfriend's collar. There was that time I couldn't tell that. There was that one thing. Oh, I know! That was too loud, wasn't it? My bad. Okay, so anyway, the story. A couple of years ago, I was bumming around Target on Black Friday. It was Black Friday. In my cart, I didn't have much. I had $20 in my back pocket, so in my cart, I just had some toothpaste, some toilet paper, and some deodorant. But something interesting is that, and I have no idea why, but I had a $375 television set. Now, obviously, I could not afford this thing, but some part of my brain told me I should have it in my cart. And unfortunately, I listened to it. So what happened was, after like 30 minutes or so, I ran into a very nervous guy. He came pacing from one side of the aisle, came up to me, and asked me point blank, "Do they still have this TV, the one that's in your cart, in stock?" To which I replied, listening to the bad half of my brain, "No, they don't. I bought this one." The part of my brain that wasn't corrupt, said, "What are you doing, man? Tell him the truth." But of course I didn't listen to him. So now what I said in return, this guy threw a huge tantrum. He was, and this is his exact expression, I swear it, "Ah! I wanted that TV. I saved up for 3 months. I didn't go to Starbucks at all just for this TV. Ah!" So, the part of my brain that wanted me to get into trouble, I slipped my arm around this guy's back. I patted him on the shoulder and said, There, buddy. Don't worry about it. Hey, I don't really need this, so how about I sell it to you?" So this guy, his jaw drops to the floor. I'm serious. This guy could have been part python for all I knew. It was like... So, he starts to stutter. "That's crazy. I mean, it's $370. I couldn't afford it off you now." And then, he obviously didn't know it was Black Friday, and the good part of my brain was disappointed with this guy, so it told me to say, "But it's Black Friday today. It's only $175. His eyes, like party balloons. Lost for words, I just came up to the guy and said, "Here, I'll give it to you." I patted the box like if I was proud of it. "I'll give it to you for $200. All the time stuttering, with hands shaking like this. He pulled out of his back pocket his wallet, handed me a wad of 20s and 50s, which I counted out for $200, then handed him my cart and took my stuff, the deodorant, the toilet paper, etc. I took it out and headed for the checkout. Now, of course, this is not a perfect story. At the checkout, my stuff on the counter with a Coke and a Baby Ruth. I was hungry, don't judge. While I was waiting to get checked out, the guy with my cart and the TV, he thinks I sold him. He's about to walk through the doors. So, as soon as I checked out, as soon as I paid with the $20 I brought, so I don't have to count real quick, I grab my stuff and I make a beeline straight for the emergency exit. 5 seconds. The alarm bell goes off. Really obnoxious sound, that alarm bell. 4 more seconds. The guy is being questioned by this big burly security dude. 5 more seconds. 2 just as burly and just as ugly goons are going through the store looking for someone with short red hair, a short trim beard, and an old coat. It is because that there were 2 other people in the store that day, they're not as handsome as me, mind you, that I was able to get to the emergency exit, open the door, and be halfway home by the time they figured out that there wasn't a real emergency. And more importantly, I was already home by the time they figured out I had gotten away. Now, I wasn't caught for the TV thing, but a day or 2 later, I did get in trouble for something else, though that's a story for another time. Thank you.
I'm going to talk about my great-uncle Helmut Strauss, who was born in a small farm in Austria. The story starts in 1945 when Hitler was really desperate for troops. So what he did was he started drafting young boys in the military. My great-uncle was one of those boys. What they had to do was they had to take a train ride to the boot camp. On the train ride, he was shoveling coal into the furnace. As he was shoveling, a little piece of coal, about that big, drilled him right in the eye. And he was actually taken off the train and sent back home. At home, news came around that the boot camp he was going to go to was actually attacked by Russian soldiers. Every single boy there was lined up and killed. So what first seemed as a burden was actually a blessing in disguise. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Logan Rabine, but today we're not here to talk about Logan Rabine. No, we're here to talk about his great-great-grandfather, Thomas Rabine. Thomas Rabine originally was born in Germany. He lived in a Christian family, and he himself became a Christian. But Thomas had realized that 90% of his family lived in France, so why not move to France? Thomas then moved to France, and he himself became a sailor. He was the captain of a fishing vessel, and he worked there for about 5 years. Now, what eventually happened was rumors that came about that Nazi Germany presence was happening in France, and he didn't want his family or his friends to get harmed. So what did he do? Well, Thomas owned a boat, he was a captain, and he knew the currents at the back of his hand. So Thomas, on the first voyage, took 6 of his friends and 11 of his family members, and it took him about a week. He found a smuggling port at the south side of Florida. Thomas then left his family there, returned home. But like today, with Twitter and such, word gets around. So when Thomas returned, he had about 20 other Jewish people knocking at his door, hoping that he would take them over there. So of course, Thomas did it. But he would charge them small fees because he had to make a living somehow now, didn't he? So Thomas felt good that he was helping people and he was getting money out of it. But, again, like Facebook and Twitter, word gets around. But sometimes it gets around to the wrong person. So what happened was, a couple of Nazi officers had learned about what Thomas was doing. Now, being a Christian would not help Thomas this time. So what did Thomas do? Well, he got the last of his family and his friends, put them on a boat, and he himself moved to America. Thomas then moved to California, became a fisherman out there, and he lived a happy life. Thank you for listening to my story.
Hello, my name's Hunter Thompson. I'd like you to meet my great-grandfather, Donald Thompson. Now, my great-grandfather, he was a military man, and his position in my story was a patrolman. Now, this is about World War II era, and patrolmen in those days rode on a horse. They pulled a mule behind them, and the mule would carry all your supplies, like extra ammunition, another gun if you lost yours, or a tent if you got stuck. And so my great-grandfather was coming back from a patrol this one day, and being a patrolman, he noticed that there was a Jeep coming in behind him. Didn't take much offense to it because they weren't shooting at him, so he didn't have to worry about it too much. So he's riding into camp. Pulling his mule behind him. And the number one rule, when pulling the mule, don't wrap the reins around your hand. That mule gets spooked, your fingers go with it. Now, he's riding in, and this encampment was meant to be taken down very quickly. So the stable was not in the greatest shape it could be. It was poles, and there was a wire that was connecting them so that they wouldn't fall over. So he's riding his horse into the stable, and all of a sudden, the men start screaming, firing their guns off in the air, out of celebration purposes. This is really stupid in my opinion, but things happen. And so the horse gets spooked, and the mule gets spooked, and my great-grandfather gets spooked. Wraps the reins around his hand. So now his hand is stuck trying to pull this mule that's trying to run off because the horse is bucking. And he's stuck about halfway in his stable. So he's got to dodge this wire that's above his head right now. And if he doesn't, bye-bye great-grandfather. His head is going off. So you picture this right now. Trying to pull this mule from running off and riding a bucking horse. 5 solid minutes he dodged that wire and rode the horse out. Got it to calm down, the men stopped screaming. Put his horse away, got off, took his mule back. Now, you have a rope around your hand. Your fingers are blue. So he's like, okay, I'm gonna go talk to the doc, get my fingers checked out. And on this particular moment, the man that happened to be arriving in the Jeep was the general. He was doing his patrols of all the encampments that were in the area. And this general's name was General Patton. This is wartime. You don't go up or down in rank. He walks up to my great-grandfather and he goes, son, that was the greatest show of horsemanship I have ever seen. And promotes him right there on the spot. Thank you for hearing my story.
My name is Alberto Tresconi. I am an old man. Done a lot in this life. I started out in Italy, making metal, that sort of thing. And I moved out to America. I had a long travel across to the West Coast, keeping myself alive with metal. When I got there, I started to make gold beds, what this is. That brought me a lot of money. Using that money, this money, bought property, Washington Hotel, Rancho San Lucas, Halfway House. Became very, very successful thanks to this money. I'm known for this, and for sheep. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Sebastiana Cisneros. I was born in Mexico, in my grandpa's farm. At age 4, I was expected to cook and clean and help around the farm. My mother would wake me up at 4 a.m. to pick corn and grind in the molcajete. My grandmother lived with us and she noticed I had a good hand for cooking, so she taught me how to make tamales, gorditas, and pozole. Where I lived is now considered Dia de los Reyes. We would gather and have a big celebration to cook. I would make my gorditas. So I became the best cook in my colony. I was 17 and I was married already, with my own family. In 1896, Pancho Villa began stealing from the poor. For the rich to give to the poor. We would hide in the mountains to go to different colonies. One day, Pancho Villa came to my house. I saw, and I immediately hid my kids. I made him food, and he would come back and forth to my house. We became very good friends. Rumor got around, and Emilio Zapata came to see me. He would take me animals and anything else I needed to protect me. And he protected my family. We became really good friends. Thank you.
Hola, buenas tardes. My name is Cristobal. I'm going to tell you a story of how I came to this great land, America. It was around the year 1881, and I was aboard a ship called the Aventurero. It was on its way to America, Boston Port to be exact. I leave my beloved homeland, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I had to get my family out of Spain, to escape poverty and oppression. It's been a month now since being on a ship. It's been interesting. One night, I could not sleep. I was too full of anticipation and wonder for this new land. Another month passed, and we made it to Boston. When the ship got there, the port could not be seen, for it was a fog so thick it could be cut with a knife. I was afraid that I might crash with another ship, or the port. But the crew knew what they were doing, and within an hour, the ship was docked. My family and I were taking our first few steps in America. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kathy Hayes. I am Brianna's mom. Our family is so big that when we tell people that there's 17 of us, meaning 17 sons and daughters, they look at us like we're crazy. But we have to clarify that half of them are adopted and half of them are biological. The cool thing about this is when we went to the doctor, we really wanted children, but he told us we could not and we weren't able to. We were devastated. But one night we made a promise to each other, me, my husband and I, that for every child God gave us, we would adopt a child with a special need. This led to our first miracle. We conceived our first biological son, Eddie. And then that led to our first adoption, Michael. But every child had a miracle. We heard about Brianna's birth father from a front page of an article in a newspaper. And we decided that this boy needs a family, but what are we going to do about it? We decided to find out, and he was 14 and crippled and burned. And the problem is the strain thing, that back then, adopting a 14-year-old was very strange, since everyone wanted the little children. But we looked into it and brought him to the U.S. on a green card for plastic surgery that he couldn't get on Honduras. Later on in life, he met Brianna's birth mother, and she had Brianna, but she couldn't take care of her. In Brianna's infant years, she had a hole in her heart and a crooked esophagus, and she was very pale and sickly. But one day, just all of a sudden, she just healed, and her color came back to her face, and her esophagus was fine, and her heart was okay. We decided then that we would adopt her as well. The adoption took 3 years. The cool thing about her adoption was that our first son, Eddie, raised money to adopt her. Which, another cool thing is, I love this, is that her brothers and sisters adored her so much that they would argue every night on who she got to sleep with. But we are so grateful to God for every one of them.
I am here to tell a legend that has not been told
very often, but is still rich in quality. It was an old legend. My ancient grandfather, his name was Elwin Bat. He was a Mormon, and he was a hard worker, and he had 4 wives. But his life was full of challenges and hardships, and especially the hardest challenge of them all was dealing with his wives. Something you can testify. Okay, so the first wife, she didn't care for him. All she wanted was the money. Yes, all she wanted was the money. That's all she cared about. The second wife, she didn't care for him. All she wanted was food and a shelter. And Elwin, had to work hard to provide for that. The third wife, the times were good. But the only problem is they were short. She was always off doing something. But the only wife he actually cared for was the fourth one. Loving, compassionate, caring, and overall had a great time. But he was latched on with the other 3. Shackled, they might say. But it was one faithful day. He woke up with an idea. The word had spread that a new city was coming to their fair land, and he decided to jump on the opportunity. So he took the one wife he loved and ran away with her. But when they got to the city, it was a harsh place. Engines. It was all new to a hard person. Eventually, after many times of struggles and long stories, he met a fair man who invested in the transportation industry. Him and Elwin and the man went big places, ended up making their own trolley system. And he was born a hard-working man who tried to scrub the money that he needed, and he ended up dying and living old, a rich and happy man.
Hola, my name is Tomasa Luna Flores, and I'll be telling you a story about my family's cow named Guayaba. Guayaba wasn't your typical cow. She was somewhat special. It all started my family's ranch in New Pueblo, Mexico, when Guayaba was born in a small corral in my family's ranch. Guayaba, I tell you, she loves food. She was the major foodaholic, and she'll do anything to get food. Remember one time, Guayaba, after giving birth, she would hide her calf under a bush because there was a lot of wolves in my family's ranch, but she'll give birth far, far, far away from the herd. No one knows why. I guess it was her thing. So it got my Uncle Jose mad. So one idea he had was to try to find where she hid them, but he didn't know how. But I'll let him show you.
Guayaba, ay. Why must you always ask us eso? You hide your newborn baby calves far, far away from the herd, then vas a comer otra vez. I have an idea. I got it. This plan will not fail. Hey, come on, wait. Come on. Whoa, whoa. Hey, come on. Go find the baby calf, come on. You silly baka. I knew this plan in finding your baby calf would work. Come on, let's go.
And later on that day, my tío Jose had some work to do in the barn. And well, I tell you, Guayaba was at it again. She did the most, I can't even explain it. She did something so, Just see for yourself.
Okay, Guayaba, you stay here, okay? I need to do some work. Don't eat any food that doesn't belong to you, okay? Be good. Guayaba! ¿Qué haces? That food isn't for you. Sácate from there. Bonita, come on. Let's go. Be ashamed of yourself. Is that all you have to say for yourself?
No!
Huh?
I tell you that Guayaba loves food. She didn't care if it was human or animal food. Food was food to her. Oh, Guayaba. What a foodaholic. But I remember this one time, I was going to bring out my newborn niece. Wait, she was not a newborn. She was around 6 months old. It was a nice, beautiful day outside. So there was a tree, and I decided to lay her underneath it. But I forgot something inside the house, so I had to go get it. My niece, she's the most beautiful baby on earth. Oh, I forgot something at the house. I need to get it. Guayaba! The bebé, get up from ahorita! And as slowly and as hard as she could, she stretched out on all 4 legs, carefully going and backing away from the baby. Knowing the baby was under her, her face was priceless. Like, she knew the baby was underneath her the whole entire time. But it all had to come to an end. It came the day where Guayaba died. Guayaba was the best cow we ever had in El Rancho, and we will miss her.
She was the best and funniest cow we ever had on the rancho. We will love and miss you, Guayaba. Rest in peace. No! Time for dinner.
Hello, my name is Alan Jenkins. This is my family legend, and this is my father, Rick Jenkins. He spent most of his life here in California. He was born here along with his 5 brothers. Only 3 are alive now today. When him and his brothers got old enough to take care of themselves, his parents moved to Ohio. His mother and his father. But what they didn't count on was most of their sons following them to Ohio. All except for one. My dad, where he met my mother, had my sister, and then me. But this was all after an entire first half of their life here in California, growing up in a very bad school. And in that school, they had to stick together. This was because of one incident that completely changed them. That incident was one day, one of the brothers was laying on a school field, and a gang of other kids went to him and kicked him nearly half unconscious. This made them realize that they had to stick together. So, they formed the Jenkins Gang. Their mother made them jackets. They had Jenkins on the back of them. They wore chain belts, and all this was with permission from their mother and father. From that point on, they stuck together like any brothers would. But now, sometimes, they feel like they hate each other. Sometimes they say that I'm not his brother anymore. But I've heard them all, on occasions, say that no matter what, they still love each other, like brothers. They may not always agree with each other, and sometimes they may just think that they're plain stupid. But they still love each other. Thank you.
And I'm going to tell you a story about how my parents fell in love. My mom was very distraught one night, a long time ago, after breaking up with her boyfriend. And she was praying to God, asking him to send her the man she was meant to be with. And the one thing she requested was for him to have blue eyes, because when she was a little girl at a church camp, they said that you could be specific with the person that you wanted to be with. And the only thing she requested was blue eyes. And as she was done praying, her friend came bursting through the door and whisked her away to an unknown destination. And they ended up at a party after some guys had asked them to go. They ended up at a party. And at first my mother was very hesitant to get in the car. However, her friends managed to coax her out. And as she was getting out of the car, she locked eyes with the most beautiful blue eyes she had ever seen, the eyes of my father. And her friends left to go talk to other people, leaving her alone, and he came to speak with her. And she at first was hesitant to get to know him because she was kind of shy, but by the end of the night she was very interested in this man. And as she was leaving the party, he asked for her number, and she said no. However, she said that she would call him if he gave her his number, and he looked at her with a look of disappointment because he didn't think she was serious. And in that moment, she saw a glowing light around him, and God told her that that was the man she was meant to be with. And she looked him straight in the eye, and she said, "Yes, I will call you." And 2 weeks later, she called, and they got married a few months after, and they had me.
I'm Haviland Graham, and I'd like to tell you the story of how my parents first met. My mom, Charlene.
Hi, I'm Charlene.
Grew up in a small town in West Virginia called Morgantown, while my dad, David.
I'm David.
Grew up in just a small town in Pittsburgh called Lynchburg. They originally met when they were 15 years old at a summer camp. My dad's friend, Danny.
Danny.
Convinced my dad to go for the week. And my mom, she lived nearby and thought it would be fun. Their first encounter was when my dad and Danny were walking back to their dorm room, and they first saw my mom sitting on the grass.
Well, I don't know. Why don't you go talk to her, Ted?
Oh my God. I'm Charlene.
They both started laughing at how weird the conversation was. Some guy she'd never met just walked up to her. But they ended up having a really good time, and they started a conversation. They ended up being a small summer romance together and spend all their time together doing their activities in the same group. It was a great time until it was the end of camp and they both had to leave and go back to their homes. It was a sad departing. My parents, after that day, did not talk for a year. Since they lived far away and there wasn't any phones, they couldn't. When their first encounter later that summer was when my dad and Danny bumped into my mom as she was going to mail a letter.
Hi, Danny. Hi, David.
Hi, Charlotte.
My mom and Danny started a small conversation, very normal. But then my mom did have to mail her letter, so she excused herself to mail it to her boyfriend back home.
Okay, well, I gotta go mail this letter right here to my boyfriend back home.
So, guess she's got a boyfriend.
Yeah, apparently. But hey, see that girl there? She's cute. Go talk to her.
After that day, they both went home after their camp and they didn't talk for 12 years. The only thing that they did keep in common was all three of them kept in contact, but not my dad and my mom were not together, just with Danny.
Danny.
It was one night when my dad was on the phone with Danny that Danny recommended that my dad call my mom.
So, David.
Yeah?
Do you remember that girl, Charlene, from when we went to that summer theater camp thing in the summer? Yeah, I hear she's going through some pretty tough times. You should call her up, talk to her.
After that phone call, a few minutes later, my dad ended up calling my mom.
Hello?
Hey, it's David. Remember me from summer camp?
Yeah, of course I remember you.
That simple greeting started an hour-long conversation that which, about 2 weeks later, led to my parents' first actual date. That date led to many more dates and ended up with a 30-year relationship and a 22-year marriage. But this is a story that's been told to me by my aunts, uncles, grandparents, parents, and close family friends like Danny.
Danny.
It's a story I find very sweet, and I look forward to telling my kids of how their grandparents met in the future. Thank you.
My name's Phoenix. Apparently I'm the new mascot for Millennium. Yeah, it's kind of big expectations, but people want logos of my face to be like... I don't think that's for me. So, my family legend is about my uncle. Everybody has that father figure, which should be your father, obviously, that teaches you everything that you need to know. Some people don't have that father figure and they find somebody else, like a close relative or uncle. My second father figure was my uncle. My uncle put 33 years in the military, so he was pretty well organized and respected by his nephews and cousins and whatnot. Every Sunday, my uncle would have this tradition. He would light up all his cars, something he'd love more than just family itself. He'd have this tradition, even if the car wasn't clean, or if it was, he would wash it, wax it, the whole spiel. So, as my uncle trying to be a nice uncle, he'd ask me to come help him. Obviously, I would say yes. I was 13 to 14 years old by this time. So, at this time, I'm trying to be mischief. And I was trying to get a job with my uncle. So, I would leave around 6 o'clock to try to beat my uncle to wash his cars, but he'd already be out there. So, after a few weekends of that, I got tired. Waking up at 6 o'clock is kind of hard. So, he'd have all the supplies laid out for me already. Everything I'd need. After I'd finished washing the cars, one Sunday, I went into the dining room table where he was looking at this giant stack of letters. He was looking at this one, retirement letter from the military. He told me the previous days that if you love your job, you never work a day of your life. So, with those words, I asked him what was the letter about. He laughed. Then he tossed the letter into the shredder. I was curious. So, I asked him again, what was the letter? He said it's a retirement letter from the military. The only way they can get rid of me is if they put me 6 feet under the ground when I die. Without knowing that, my uncle finally retired on Father's Day that year. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Martha May from Southern Carolina, and I'm going to tell y'all my testimony how I got here to Texas. I was young and everything to me seemed spontaneous and fun. I was fresh out of high school and I was looking for something new. South Carolina was just not fun anymore. I was growing tired of it. I decided to go to Florida to go visit my Aunt Annie Ann. We rode the bus a long, hot, loud ride, when as soon as I got there, I met eyes with the sweetest guy. He smelled like peach cobbler and had the brightest blue eyes. It was like love at very first sight. We dated a couple weeks while I was there. I told him I refused to go back to South Carolina, that I was too scared. That Mama wouldn't approve the love that we had grew, like a beautiful daisy flower, out of the ground and out of the blue. I told Mama, and she said that she would support me no matter what. So we were both happy, and we finally made a decision that we would live the life that we'd always envisioned. We moved to Texas and we got married. My love inherited plenty of money, so we built our own home on our own land. But we lived like kings and queens, but I couldn't sit there and watch other people go through poverty. My mother was beat as a slave by the white man, picking cotton. She put her life together like glue, putting a puzzle back together with glue. I had made a decision I didn't want to watch anybody else go through the pain I went through as a child. So we built homes for the poor. And of course our house was always an open door. I've helped bring many lives into this world of pain, and that's something I'm very proud to say. I worked and prayed to get to this very day, and as a reward, they built a beautiful Miller Park dedicated to all the heart we put into the community. And with much love and much peace, I give y'all my family. Wish y'all all luck on the journey of life and peace.
And I'm going to tell you my family legend, which is actually a Puerto Rican legend about how Coqui got his song. It all started in the beautiful island of Puerto Rico. And Queen Iguaca was a wise, caring ruler. And the characters in this would be Queen Iguaca, Boa, Anol, and Sapo Cancho, y Coqui. But there's two Coquis. There's Duente and Palmido. So remember that. Okay. So in the island of Puerto Rico, the Queen Iguaca was sad. The animals did not want to play. They wanted to be lazy and eat. So she went to nearby islands like Cuba. She saw there that the animals were happy and playful, and they just didn't sleep and eat like in her island. So when she came back, she was saddened, and she was trying to figure out how to bring back her island. And then Viento, the wind, came to her and told her, "I have your answer, your majesty." So she happily said, "What's the answer?" And he said, "Well, we must hold a race, of course." She was laughing hysterically, not believing the wind. She told him, "How is this possible? Do you not see these animals? They are fat and lazy. They don't want to do anything but sleep and eat." But Viento also laughed, saying, "Ha! But you have to encourage them with a premio, a prize." She looked at him with a smirk, thinking, "Yeah, that's a good idea." So she did that. The following day, she went and told her subjects, "My subjects, please listen." And they looked at her and listened. She said, "I shall hold a race in 1 month." The animals just started laughing. But she said, "The winner of the race will get a premio, a prize, and it will be kept a secret until the winner is announced." And so the animals were encouraged. They exercised, and the tiny Coquis knew if they were going to win this race and beat the other animals, they would have to work extra hard. So they did. So then, a couple months before the race was about to begin, they became helpless. They felt saddened. The animals had grew so thin and fast. They had become faster than any other animal. And they lost hope. They were sad, not wanting to do anything. But then Duente thought of a plan. And since the Coquis were mute, he had signaled them what the plan was. Before the race started, each coquille would hide somewhere, and Palmido would be in the end, and Duente would be first. So if anything happened and one of the coquilles got kicked out of the race, another one would quickly take his place. The coquilles were happy and they cheered. So the following day, in Yunque, the animals gathered around. And Iguaca said, "Please listen to my words, my subjects, because I do not want you guys to push or shove. I don't want you guys to cheat at all." So when she said, "Get ready, get set, go," all the animals ran. All she could see was a cloud of dust. But what she did not know is that the animals were pushing and shoving, throwing each other to the back. And the coquilles, of course, they replaced one another, just like Fuente thought. And in the end, guess who won? Amido. But this did not go so well for Sapo Gancho. He was so angry. He said, "No, Queen Iguaca. Palmido and Duente have cheated. They replaced each other during the race." That boa was so smart enough to not believe that. She wanted to win. So she said, "No, my queen. Sapo Gancho also lost because he was also pushing and shoving. And Anol was not happy either." So he said, "Yeah, well, Sapo Gancho, Boa, Duente, and Palmido also cheated." In the end, she was furious. She found out that all the animals had cheated. She did not want to give them a premio. But then Wind came to her and whispered in her ear. And she smiled, and she said, "Thank you, Wind." And so she announced, the coquilles had the right idea in mind. So they will get their prize, because they were not selfish to just think about themselves only. Every coquille in Puerto Rico will get a voice, but only at night. And if they leave their island, then ye shall surely die, coquille, she said to them. So the coquilles didn't care. They were happy. They sang every night. So if you go to Puerto Rico, you will hear this beautiful music that the coquilles make at night. But if you're lucky enough to find one, do not take him from his island, or he will die. Thank you.